she was just kind of like, well, have you experienced any like traumatic things recently, like changes? And I'm like going down the list of things, and then at the end I was like, but I don't think I've really experienced anything traumatic recently.
Hey Jess,
Hi, Bree.
how's today?
Today's not too bad, you know, kind of a slow Monday. What about you?
Today has been bad. I had a chill day. I didn't do too
That's good.
much. Worked a little.
Chill Mondays are the best because Mondays can
Mhm.
be rough.
They really can. Today's episode we're talking about trauma,
Trauma.
and that's a pretty heavy topic.
Yeah. I feel like a lot more people at least are being open about trauma because like with social media and stuff, people are like on there, and then as well as like therapists and stuff being on social media and being able to like talk about it and whatnot. So I feel like it's being more talked about, but it can be a
Yeah,
heavy topic.
yeah, for sure. And one thing I think I'd never realized about trauma up until this year is you can like have experienced trauma and not even be aware that like that was traumatizing. That was like trauma.
Yeah, that is true. I also like looking into it, I also found too how it's kind of interesting that someone just because of like the way our brains are wired and how we're all different that we can like experience something and think that it's traumatic, and then someone else could experience the same thing and it might not even have the same effects on them as it does for you.
Oh, that is so true.
Mhm.
But then I feel like sometimes I'll speak for myself. Like I'll experience something and like talking about it to somebody else, it sounds like so traumatizing, but like to me, I didn't even think of it that way.
Mhm.
Like,
That makes me think, have you ever heard of secondhand, I think it's like secondhand trauma. Have you heard that?
mm,
Like it's a trauma that you can experience just from hearing like a story or like someone else explaining their trauma to you.
mhm.
I just
Oh,
read about that today. I never knew
that's
that
interesting.
was
It makes me think of being a hypochondriac. Like you hear about something medical that happened to somebody, and then it makes you like nervous and fearful about it.
Yeah, I have thought about it. The only like I kind of thought about it coming from a stance of if you were like a therapist or something. I feel like that
Mm,
could be a
yeah,
heavy job, and even like caseworkers and stuff and
yeah.
experiencing it that way, but just like us having a casual conversation and you telling me, it's like
Mhm.
I would never think that that could be another way.
So, okay, saying that, what would be your definition of trauma?
For me, I think okay, so I feel like there's different, I don't want to say like different levels, but I do feel like that there are, I would feel like it's like a stressful event or even like yeah, a stressful event or something devastating or take away that's devastating. A stressful event that you've experienced it that you've now like it affects the way that you either like see yourself, interact with other people, or just kind of how you experience the world in itself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree. I feel like trauma is anything that changes your perspective of
Mhm.
a situation or even like the way you respond to certain things. For me personally, um, me and my son's dad went to court, and like in dealing with going to court, not until probably almost a year later, I didn't realize that that was traumatizing for me, but
Mhm.
it had got to a point where, like, whenever I saw that, like, I had an email notification on my phone, I would get so nervous because I knew it was my probably my lawyer texting me or something. I'm just like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
what now? Like, what do you need from me? What did they say? Like, what's going on?" And so that, for me, I found out a year later was actually, like, a trauma response. Cause like, who gets
Mhm.
nervous when they see emails pop up, like,
Yeah.
notifications or emails pop up on their phone? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And then, like, even after the fact, like, the way that I dealt with him moving forward and the way that I, like, kinda looked at people moving forward was just, like, totally different, and I didn't really realize
Mhm.
it until I was talking to my mom about it, and then that's what made me go into therapy because I was like, "Well, this is traumatic." My mom had to tell me, like, "That's a traumatic situation," and in
Yeah,
the moment, like, I'm dealing with it and I'm okay. Like, it was, like, moments where I'd be sad, but, like, I was okay. But then I actually was listening to a sermon today where the pastor talked about having the grace to go through trials and situation and going looking back on it, like, people are like, "Oh, how'd you get through that? How'd you do that?" And it was the grace given by God to, like, experience that. And so,
yeah,
I think that's a big thing too, like, sometimes people go through trauma, and it really is kinda like, "How did you deal with that?" Or, "I could never," or like how you're saying, like, secondhand trauma, like,
mhm.
hearing about it and you're just like, "Oh, wow." But that person literally had the grace to go through whatever trauma or tribulation that they experienced. Like, for me, hearing people talk about, like, I don't see how people just go on and live life, you know, and but I don't know. I guess somehow they found peace with it, which I know not everybody that's victims of that have, but
Yeah, when I think about that, I feel like the scariest thing with trauma sometimes is the fact that depending on, like, when it happens, you kinda can have, like, a reality in your head of, like, what life looked like before it happened, and then trauma hitting, and then getting to the point where you feel like, "Am I ever going to be at a point where I'm, like, normal again?" Or, like, "Am I ever going to be able to see, like, the upside of life again?" And, I mean,
mm,
that is kinda, like, tough.
yeah.
That is
Rough.
I could not even imagine the same,
Yeah.
like you said, how people can able to get through that. So that's a good point. Like, even going off of that, thinking about trauma,
Mhm,
and you saying how you went through trauma and you didn't even, like, realize that it was trauma when you were going through it.
mhm,
Sometimes I like, have you ever thought, well, I don't know, but sometimes I will, like, look back and I kinda, like, not wanna say that I compare my trauma to other people, but it's like sometimes it's like, "Girl," I'm thinking, there's other people that have, like, experienced worse things than you or what you're calling trauma, and I feel like sometimes you have to, like, not even put yourself in this space to compare yourself. Because I remember, like, going to the doctor, and she was just kinda like, "Well, have you experienced any, like, traumatic things recently, like, changes?" And I'm, like, going down the list of things, and then at the end, I was like, "But I don't think I've really experienced anything traumatic recently." And she was like, "The fact that you would even say you haven't experienced anything traumatic and you've literally just, like, gone through a list of
yeah,
things
yeah,
is crazy," because sometimes we can just kinda like, "This is normal." Just
mhm,
blow it off, but I think that we kinda have to, like, give ourselves that grace to be like, "This is like, I did go through something traumatic, and
mhm.
I do kinda, like, have to deal with this,"
Yeah,
you know?
exactly, and I think that's the whole point of it, like, having to, I realize because if I didn't realize, "Oh, I did experience something traumatic," I woulda never dealt with it because I felt like,
Mhm.
"Oh, it's not traumatic." And I feel like I mean, sometimes that can be like a trick of the enemy, like, thoughts in your head, like, "Oh, that wasn't anything that terrible." So then you're not
Yeah.
forced to deal with it, and then if you don't deal with it, it can hold you back in other areas of your life, and I
Mhm.
feel like that's, like I don't know, that'll cause, like, a snowball effect, and then you'll
Yeah.
be, like, 60 years old, and you're like, "Oh, still dealing with the side effects of something that happened when you were 12."
That is so true, because even just thinking about, like, childhood trauma, right? That
Mhm,
was one of the things that we were gonna talk about, and some people may not even think that this is anything traumatic, but when thinking about it right now, it's like that kinda, like, did change the way, like, I saw things, I looked at life, even, like, the way I just moved. So, I think end of elementary school time and then, like, going into middle school years, I feel like I struggle, well, I didn't struggle at this point, but I, like, started gaining weight, right? And my brothers would probably deny it to this day, but they would make, like, little comments, like, I would wear a shirt and they would, like, make a comment how it was, like, tied around my tummy, and that was just, like I feel like that was just the start of me being very self-conscious of, like, the way that I looked,
Mhm.
and then going into high school well, like, middle school time, I started, like, losing weight around that time and then have lost weight still in, like, high school, but then entering pageants again. Well, not again, entering pageants, and then it, like, brought back the whole weight issue because
Mhm.
when you enter pageants, depending on, like, the system or whatever you're in, there's kinda like I would compete in the USA system, and they were, like, very, like, heavy health forward, the way you looked, and feeling like your body had to look a certain way, and then I was introduced to diets, and then, like, trying this diet, that diet, weight going up and down, and you would think that, okay, your brothers were picking on you. That's not anything traumatic. It's just a little weight thing, but when you think about it, it's like, yeah, because just from, like, that little seed that was planted, that's, like,
Mhm.
years of being so self-conscious about your body, of feeling like you have to try this diet, that diet, looking in the mirror and, like, you look fine, but in your mind, you're not fine,
Mhm.
and but to someone else, that could have, like, not been traumatic. So it's just crazy how trauma can affect people differently.
Yeah, and that is traumatic. I can see how that can be traumatic because
Mhm,
I feel like as women already, like, our appearance is, like, top conversation, and especially when it comes to our weight. So,
mhm.
yeah, planting those seeds, even though I'm sure, your brothers love you, so they didn't mean anything by it. We
Right.
know that, but, like, it just shows the effect of, like, the words that we say to people. It may not mean anything to us, but how it affects other people. I used to pick on my brother's weight growing up too. And he is like that. He's very health conscious now and always on a diet. My mom talks about him all the time. Every time we get together, "You're on a diet." Like, but I don't my words could have played a part in that, other people's words.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing to be self-aware of, honestly, is, like, the trauma we can inflict on other people.
Mhm.
So that's a different perspective.
If I didn't, like, get to a point in as far as, like, dealing with trauma, if I didn't get to a point and recognize that was a problem and me, like, getting control of that thought process, that could've opened the door of, like, eating disorders,
Mhm.
like, all of that. So dealing like, having to deal with trauma
Yeah,
is crucial.
it really is. And then speaking of, like, childhood traumas, I feel like in our adulthood, people have a lot of traumas from childhood, but
Mhm,
because that's the environment you grew up in, it's normal to you. And so I feel like that can play another factor in people not even realizing that they have trauma because it was normal. So,
mhm.
like, things like I just think one thing I think about is, like, people with plastic bags, black people. We keep plastic bags. And just use it for everything. I have a cabinet full
Uh-huh.
of plastic bags now, but it's like, why do we do that? Like, I don't see white people doing that. It's like
You know, I had to, like, try to get myself to stop doing that. Like, I started buying the legit, like, little bags
yeah.
to stop using.
Yeah,
To stop, like, why am I collecting Walmart and Target?
exactly. Putting it on my head as a shower cap. It just like, why? Just go buy shower caps. But, like, if you grew up doing that, you just think, "Oh, that's normal," but then it's like, "Okay, why
Yeah.
did people originally start off doing that?" I heard this before, which I never knew. So, like, growing up, we would travel home to go see my grandparents, and so
Mhm.
sometimes a lot of times we would stop, but sometimes on the trips, like, my parents would pack food, mostly my dad, would pack food for us to have, like, so we wouldn't have to stop, right? And so, of course, like, I feel like a lot of older parents, like, they just do that because they probably grew up doing that if you go on a trip.
Mhm.
But I
Yeah.
actually found out the reason why that started with Black people was because if you were traveling from the South to the North, you couldn't stop to get food. You couldn't stop because if the white people caught you, That's
Mhm.
it. So, like, you have to pack food with you on your journey, and I feel like that's something that's just been passed down, and so, like, people
Mhm.
still do it now, which I know some people probably can't afford to stop and get food, and so you do that, but then it's, like, other people that do it just because that's what you grew up doing, like,
Mhm.
we just pack
Mhm.
food, and unknowingly, I feel like that's, like, not to get too deep, unknowingly, it's kinda like generational curses, and that
Mhm.
creates trauma, like, I feel like
Mhm.
generational curses are trauma. People
Mhm.
doing stuff out of habit, don't know why you're doing it. It's
Don't
just what
question
it is.
it.
Yeah.
Just keep going with the flow. Like, this
Mhm.
is how it is, this is how it has been, and this is how it will be, but it's like, no.
You gotta start questioning some stuff.
Yeah, for real, because 'cause you'll just, like, years and years of doing things and not even know why.
Mhm.
Do you think you've had any trauma since you've been an
Oh,
adult?
yeah, girl. Definitely. The trauma with going to court,
Mhm.
being lied on, that was very traumatic. Trauma with friendships,
Mhm.
'cause, like, growing up, I feel like I was pretty sheltered to an extent. I grew up, in the church, so I was kinda sheltered from a lot, I felt
Yeah.
like, and so graduating high school and becoming an adult and meeting people who didn't grow up the same way as me and the way they acted, some of the stuff is still traumatic to me because it's like, I don't know, it's so foreign to me that people can be, like, genuine liars, like, that's a part of your personality. You're a liar, you lie about anything for no reason, like
Yeah, naturally.
right, like, I was like, "Oh, I like your hair," you said, "Thank you, I did it," knowing you went to the shop and got it done. Like, just lying for no reason.
Oh,
Yes.
I was, like, not expecting you to say that. That was like a late reaction because I was not expecting you to say.
People just be lying about anything, and it's really, like for me, I feel like that has been trauma in my adulthood because it causes you to build a wall against
Mhm.
people, and it's like, I remember I was working my first job, and somebody had stole money out of this girl's purse that was in her locker. Why did you go in her locker, take her purse, and steal her money, and then lied about it, and they caught you on camera? Like, just stuff like that, and then, like, friendships that I've had, people just lying, being conniving, talking behind your back, and it's just like, "Whoa, the world
Yeah.
is cold, I need a
Oh,
jacket." It's ridiculous. So I feel like that was traumatic for
yeah.
me, coming into the world and realizing as an adult that everybody is not like you, everybody wasn't raised like you, and everybody doesn't
Mhm.
have morals
Yeah. Oh
or
my
hold
god.
yourself to any type of standard.
Yeah. When you said when you said, like, growing we don't have to get into this topic, but I just have to say, when you said, like, growing up in the church or whatever, it made me think of the question of, like, do you think do you think that growing up in the church that has made like, being in the church and around the church has church given you any trauma at all?
Um, I honestly I don't.
Or, like, religion trauma in general?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Right? I thought so too, like, it just made me think of it, like, we don't have to answer it, but it was just, like, a question that came
I
to my
think we
mind.
should answer it though. That's a good question. Trauma from growing up in the church. Um, kinda.
Yeah.
I see. This is one of those things where you don't realize you have trauma until you really like dive
Mhm.
into it. But I would say for me, the one thing that I've noticed now, which this will make sense, is really triggering for me as a
Mhm.
Christian, is Christians who don't live a life worthy to call themselves a Christian.
Mhm.
That triggers me so much. Like, I get that we're human, people always say that, we fall short, whatever, I get it. But, like, people that are just actively in sin, people who just live any type of way, but
Mhm.
claim to be a Christian bothers
Yeah.
me. 'Cause I feel like growing up in the church, I seen that so much, but what made it worse was, like, people making you feel less than and making you feel like you aren't as saved as them or you aren't on their
Yeah.
level
Mhm.
because which I mean, I grew up in the church as a child, so of course I didn't have a title, but like certain people having
Mhm.
a title and feeling like, oh, I need to be respected this way and I need to be seen this way. But you're at home living life so crazy. God wouldn't know you if he seen you. Like
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I feel like that's kind of been traumatic for me. And then now like seeing it as an adult, I guess I get why it triggers me.
yeah, yeah. For me, uh, I I think that I do have, like, some trauma from growing up in the church. Um, I'm, like, treading lightly here because I honestly think that, like, most of my trauma, though, is, like, centered around, like, relationships,
Mhm.
and more so, like, uh, I don't know how to explain this,
I know what you mean, but I'm not
You
gonna say it
do?
for you. Yeah, but I'm not gonna say it for you.
Like, I feel like for me, it's more so like, sheesh, okay, this is a good way for me to put it. So, like, growing up in the church, right? There's, like, 2 decisions that they say are, like, your 2 most important decisions that you make. One, your relationship with the Lord when you decide to follow Jesus Christ, and then the second one is who you marry.
Mhm.
And I think the second one has, like, it's almost like you know that it's an important decision, but I feel like I don't know, I just feel like I have some trauma around it from growing up in the church and then just, like, seeing people and their relationships and their marriages, and I don't know, that's all I can say.
Yeah, I know 1,000% what you mean. Yeah.
Mhm, because I feel like sometimes, like, people can put on, like, the best show, and then, like, when you, like, really find out and you're like, "Y'all are out here
Train
just
wreck, yeah.
the y'all need a Grammy."
Yeah. No,
And
literally. I
yeah, and so I feel like it has, like, caused me to, like, move differently when it comes to, like, dating relationships and all that, and I don't know, it's just a little traumatic.
no, I know what you mean, and I feel like that goes back to, like, in my opinion, people because if we're saved, right, we know
Mhm,
that, like, God is gonna present the right person for us, and if God is giving it to us, then it's perfect. Like,
mhm,
outside of worldly standards of perfect, like, we know that it can work, God is in the midst of it, it will work, and He knows our needs and our wants. And so if you proclaim to be a Christian and you're seeking God for the person you're gonna be with, it shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be all the stuff y'all got going on, and then y'all trying to act like it's something that it's not. And
mhm.
I feel like it just goes back to people really truly not, like, seeking God's face like they should and not really and I mean, granted, a lot of people probably were younger when they got married, so maybe they weren't even
Yeah,
saved when they got married, you know?
yeah,
That's a
yeah, and
whole other thing.
that's a I don't know, we could literally have, like, a whole episode
Yeah, we really can.
we could, like, have a whole episode on that, but yeah, traumatic.
Yeah.
Like, last year when I got really sick and, I, like, passed out, and the thing is, I remember everything that happened right before passing out. I was, like, going to the bathroom, getting up, feeling kinda dizzy, going to my room, but next thing you know, like, after that, like, passing out, mom finding me in the hallway, praise the Lord that she found me because if no one was around, I don't know what would've happened, but I
Mhm.
have not been the same since, like,
Yeah.
not at all, and, like, the slightest, like, little things, like, I know that you can, like, experience, like, trauma through, like, events and relationships and stuff, but, like, having health trauma?
Mhm.
I'm like, what in the entire world? And
Yeah.
sometimes I'll be like, "Lord," I remember what my life was like before I passed out a year ago. Am I
Mhm.
am ever gonna be like normal?
Yeah, and you definitely will. We rebuke
Like,
that in the name of Jesus. You definitely
I'm
will.
like, what? Like, what is going on here? But yeah, traumatic. That was another traumatic event.
Yeah, the whole thing can be really traumatic.
Hmm.
Nutty.
Oh, I was in a car accident in like 20. It was either like 2019 or 2020, and I remember that so vividly. Like slow motion. It was raining, hitting a
Girl, is
puddle.
the devil trying to take you out? What is going
Bree, listen, 20 listen, girl, 20 this was right
on?
before
I
COVID
remember.
happened.
Yeah.
I was going to Tennessee. I was with my mom, hit a puddle. We were like circles, middle of the highway.
Mhm.
And I just remember because I was driving, I just remember like slow motion. I was literally like, Lord, this is it. Like, I literally thought this was it. And the only thing I could think of was like, I literally asked God, I was like, okay, what's next? Like,
Mhm.
what is after life? Like, I know that I'm gonna be with you, but what is after this?
Yeah.
And but
Lord.
clearly I did not die, but I was
Mhm.
like, surely the Lord really wants me here because I could have been gone that that moment, that time. And yeah, now that I think about it, those were kind of like not too far apart from each other. And I have not been right driving. Like I would get in the car if it was raining, I need to go home. I cannot be out here driving. It
Mhm.
was just like the worst for a while. I've gotten better now as far as like driving, but
Mhm.
I'm just like, Lord have mercy.
Yeah. And that's
Um,
another thing about I feel like traumas, like us as Christians, I feel like when we experience traumas, we can either use it as a testimony or
mhm.
use it to keep us bound.
Yes.
And I feel like it's important prayer, like once you realize something is traumatic or a trauma, just praying against the enemy having any type of foothold in your life to cause things to hold you back and keep you bound in your mind.
Mhm.
'Cause that's ugh, once you get stuck in your mind, you're ugh.
Literally, like, that is where the battle is.
Mhm.
Like, oh my gosh, you have to, like, take your thoughts
Mhm.
captive
Mhm.
because, in this, like, season of my life, it has been all about taking my thoughts captive because child,
Yeah. I feel it.
Lord, thank you, Jesus, for your word.
Yeah.
It's literally, like, life for real.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm.
What would be one thing you would say as advice for anybody who is dealing with trauma and trying to cope with it or I guess get over it for lack of better terms?
Um, I think the number one thing is not keeping it to yourself. And if you are going through something traumatic, definitely depending on like what it is, I think sometimes it's something that you either like want to push down or you don't want to like let people in and you feel like you can just kind of handle it on your own. But I think the best thing is to open up to someone that you can trust and kind of just like either talking through it and then also just like getting help professionally if that's what you need and not
Yeah.
being afraid of that because it's better to deal with it now than letting time like go by more and more and more and you never know like how worse or the toll that it can take on you like not even just mentally but physically because the stuff that we deal with mentally can affect our bodies physically
For
so
sure. Yeah. That was good advice, literally, to
mhm,
talk about it, seek professional help if you need it. There's nothing wrong with that. My advice for sure would definitely be identifying it like that
mhm,
something is trauma, calling it just what it is. And I would say prayer because you got to pray against what comes with trauma in order to stay in a mindset where you can heal from it and heal
mhm,
from it like completely.
mhm,
Because
mhm.
I don't want no remnants of the trauma.
None, none whatsoever. And I think like you're your mindset plays a big part into it too, like, believing that you can be healed from it and
Mhm.
believing that you don't have to, like, sit there in it because I don't know, I just feel like belief is a big thing because I feel like if you don't really believe it yourself, then
Mhm.
chances are you're not gonna be better if you don't believe that you can get better.
Mhm. Yep.
So alright, thank you all so much for watching today's episode. If you wanna stick around with us, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and comment down below, we wanna hear what you have to say. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
On, sweetie, don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well as head on over to our lovely TikTok at CuteConvos and don't forget to follow. See you next time.